I wasn't supposed to be there yet. Emily had told me the dinner started at 8 sharp. Corporate formal, she said. Nothing I'd enjoy, but something I should attend for appearance's sake. Still, I wrapped up my meetings early that day, around 6:15, and thought, why not surprise her? Not in a gotcha kind of way. More like a spontaneous, thoughtful kind of gesture. You know, the way married people try to keep things feeling alive. I remember thinking, I'll grab a drink on the rooftop bar first, since the event was taking place at the Astor Club downtown. One of those bougie spots with glass everything and mixologists who think they're philosophers. The elevator ride up felt unusually long, like the universe needed extra time to prepare me for what was waiting at the top. And then the doors opened. I stepped out, loosened my tie, and instantly felt that low buzz of conversation and clinking glasses. The crowd was thinner than expected. Early birds, probably execs and their plus ones soaking in the skyline before dinner. I didn't see her at first, but then I did. Emily stood near the corner of the rooftop, just left of the gas heater, half hidden behind a tall planter. She was facing away from me, not alone. Daniel was with her. Daniel. I remembered his name instantly, because it was a name that had once lodged itself in the back of my mind like a splinter. Months ago, I had asked about him after seeing a text thread pop up on her phone. Harmless stuff on the surface. Memes, inside jokes about their team lead, but the frequency caught my attention. Oh, Daniel? She said with a laugh back then. He's just this guy from analytics. We barely talk. You don't have to worry about him. And stupidly, I believed her. But now, here they were. She was standing just a little too close, laughing in that half-whispered way she used when something was asterisk made enough to keep between just two people. Daniel's body language said everything his mouth probably didn't need to. His hand was resting on her forearm, gently tracing lazy circles with his thumb. Then it moved, slowly, like he wasn't afraid of crossing a line. From her arm to her wrist, then lightly to her waist. Her hand reached up, not to push him away, but to rest on his chest in a way that said familiarity, not resistance. Then it happened. His fingers brushed her neck. And she didn't move. She tilted her head just slightly, not much, just enough to let him. It was like watching a moment from a movie you've already seen the ending to, but still hoping, somehow, that it'll end differently. I didn't even know how long I stood there. Could have been 20 seconds. Could have been a full minute. Everything else around me faded into white noise. The murmur of conversations, the clinking of glasses, even the jazz guitar playing in the background. Then, just like that, she turned, said something I couldn't hear, stepped away from him, smoothed her dress, walked back inside with a composed look on her face, like nothing had happened, like her marriage ring hadn't just been ignored. I stayed on the terrace, not out of indecision, but because I suddenly couldn't trust myself not to make a scene. My chest felt hollow. I didn't feel rage. Not then. That would come later. At that moment, I just felt something break loose in my chest. Like a rope I hadn't even known I was holding onto had snapped. Eventually, I turned and walked back toward the elevator. Left without her seeing me. I told myself I needed time to think. Time to decide what version of me would show up to the dinner. Spoiler, I didn't go. Instead, I walked the streets for a while. The chill in the Chicago air didn't register. I barely noticed the way my phone buzzed 3 times in my pocket. Texts from her, no doubt, wondering where I was. I couldn't bring myself to open them. Not yet. My legs carried me down Wabash, past old buildings and glowing signage and strangers who had no idea I was standing in the smoking rubble of my own reality. Around 10:30, I went home. The lights were on when I pulled into the driveway. Her car was there. She was waiting for me. Inside, she played it perfectly. "Hey, you okay?" she asked the moment I stepped in. She was already in sweatpants and a hoodie, her makeup off, hair pulled back. The transformation from rooftop elegance to cozy wife next door was almost chilling. She stood there in the kitchen with a glass of wine in one hand and a concerned look on her face. I nodded, didn't trust my voice. I was still trying to figure out if I was going to confront her right then, or wait. "You didn't make it to the dinner," she continued, her voice feather light. "Everything okay?" I shrugged. Got stuck at work. Lost track of time. She smiled sympathetically, like I just confirmed her suspicion that I was an overworked, distracted husband. You didn't miss much. Daniel was there for a bit. Can you believe that? He's such a harmless flirt. Harmless. She said that word like it was an old inside joke. As if the Daniel I'd seen with his hand on her neck an hour ago was a different species altogether. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. But I didn't do either. Instead, I watched her as she moved around the kitchen. I watched the way she carried herself. Calm, unbothered, almost bored. She poured herself another glass and leaned against the counter, talking about the event, how the speeches ran long, how her boss got a little too drunk. Her voice never wavered. Her eyes never looked away. If it had been a performance, it was award-worthy. I remember sitting at the edge of the couch that night while she told me about the new client from Boston who'd flown in. She talked about him for almost 5 minutes, strategically keeping the conversation far away from anything involving Daniel. I just nodded along, pretending to listen, pretending to believe. But I wasn't there anymore. I was replaying the scene on the rooftop, rewinding and pausing in my mind, wondering how long it had been going on, how many times I had missed it, how many other lies were told with that same effortless ease. Later, when she went to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a blank stare and a cup of cold coffee. I stared at the dark TV screen and thought about all the tiny moments I'd brushed off before. The late nights, the unexplained changes in routine, the sudden interest in her appearance on days when she had nothing big going on. I had told myself that trust was the foundation of any strong marriage. But what happens when the cracks start forming underneath, and you don't even notice until the whole floor gives out? That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't ask her why Daniel had touched her the way he did. I didn't ask her why she let him. I didn't ask anything. I just sat there and realized something that scared the hell out of me. She wasn't surprised when I said I missed the dinner. She hadn't even asked why I didn't text her, or why I hadn't shown up when I said I would. Because she already knew I wouldn't. Somehow she had known. And that's when I started to suspect. This wasn't the beginning of something. It was the middle of something I had already been too late to see. After that night, I stopped believing in coincidences. I didn't become a detective overnight, but something inside me switched. A quiet, watchful part of me turned on. I stopped taking things at face value. I started noticing the little things, not in a paranoid way, at least not yet. More like someone who'd just been jolted awake after sleepwalking through the last year of his life. That following Monday, I woke up before Emily and stood in the bathroom for a long time brushing my teeth, pretending not to watch her reflection in the mirror. She carried her phone into the bathroom with her again, like she always had lately, but this time, she placed it face down on the edge of the sink. She didn't used to do that. She also didn't used to shower with the door locked. That morning, she left before I did. Said she had a planning session across town and wouldn't be home until after 6. She kissed my cheek on her way out and asked if I could pick up dinner. I said sure. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just said tie like it had already been decided. By 6:30 that evening, she texted me that her meeting ran late and she'd grab something on the way. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, trying to remember when exactly it became normal for us to eat separately this many nights a week. The next day, I checked our shared calendar. We'd always used it to keep track of appointments, trips, bills. It used to be full of everything from reminders to book a vet appointment to call mom notes. But now, it was nearly blank. Only her entries remained, and most of them were vague. Team sync, off-site session, strategy planning. That wasn't the way she used to label things. She used to be specific, names, times, even little emojis. Now, it read like someone trying to leave as little behind as possible. And then there was her laptop. She used to work from home, sprawled out on the kitchen counter, singing along to playlists we built together over the years. Now, she told me she was more productive in a co-working space, which happened to be across the city. She said it helped her focus. I believed her for a while, but the receipts told a different story. One afternoon, I took out the trash and noticed a crumpled parking receipt tucked in her car's door pocket. It was for a boutique hotel garage. Dated 2 Thursdays ago. Same day she said she was at an all-day department seminar. It wasn't even close to where she claimed she'd be. When I asked her casually about that Thursday, she blinked once, just a bit too long. "Oh," she said, tilting her head like she was trying to retrieve the memory. "That seminar got moved last minute to a different building. I think we had to park near the Drake Hotel, maybe? Total nightmare. But I was with Jenna and Mark, so it was fine." It wasn't fine. The Drake didn't match the address on the receipt. Neither did her tone when she said it. Later that week, I noticed her keys were missing from the hook near the door. They used to always hang there, always. Now they traveled. Kitchen counter, bedroom nightstand, sometimes nowhere to be found. Same with her wallet. And the biggest shift? Her phone. She used to plug it in on the nightstand beside her bed, face up, often playing sleep sounds or podcasts. Now it charged downstairs. Sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes on silent, always face down. I tried not to make assumptions, but it was impossible not to see it. The space between us was growing, and I wasn't sure when the last real version of her had disappeared. Every time I reached out, physically or emotionally, she met me with half an answer, half a smile, half of herself. Felt like I was living with a decoy. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. I left work early without telling her. No reason, just a spontaneous decision to swing by her co-working space and bring her lunch. I even picked up her favorite, sesame soba noodles and a matcha latte. I remember feeling good about it, proud even. When I got there, the receptionist looked confused when I asked for Emily. "Emily?" she repeated. We don't have an Emily checked in today." "Emily Carter," I clarified. "She usually sits by the window?" The woman shook her head. "Sorry, sir. She's not on the list." I stood there, takeout bag sweating in my hands. Maybe she hadn't signed in. Maybe she was working somewhere else for the day. I texted her. "Hey, just dropped by to surprise you. They said you're not checked in. Did you move locations today?" She didn't respond for 2 hours. Then, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, babe. I forgot to update the app." We ended up having a brainstorm session at Jenna's place instead. "But that's so sweet of you. Love you." I didn't reply. I just sat in the parking lot and stared at the bag of noodles going cold on the passenger seat. I knew Jenna's building. It was halfway across town. There was no brainstorm. There was no update. There was just a lie, told quickly and confidently enough that it made me feel like I was the one overreacting. When I got home, the bag was still there. I left it on the counter. She tossed it in the trash without saying a word. By then, I had stopped trying to rationalize it. The evidence was too loud. The inconsistencies, too persistent. I began to replay everything with a new lens. Not the lens of a suspicious husband, but of someone trying to reconstruct a crime scene already half cleaned. I remembered when she stopped sharing her location on our phones. Months ago. "Just trying to limit distractions," she'd said with a smile. I remembered when she changed her passwords for the first time in years. Blamed it on a security scare at work. I remembered how, on one of her business trips, I'd noticed her suitcase was missing certain staples. No chargers, no notebooks. But her lingerie drawer had a noticeable gap. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. And maybe the most disturbing part? I stopped asking. It's not that I didn't want to know. It's that I was afraid I already did. Afraid that whatever was waiting behind the curtain would be worse than the show. And so I played the part. I kissed her goodnight. I asked about her day. I let her tell me half-truths and act like they were whole. But I was collecting things now. Memories. Receipts. Changes in tone. Sudden coolness followed by forced affection. The way she started saying, "love you," instead of, "I love you." The way she began ending phone calls first. Every detail, once meaningless, became a clue. And slowly a picture began to form. Not of infidelity exactly. Not yet. But of distance. Of emotional withdrawal disguised as busyness. Of secrets hiding in plain sight. I was watching someone drift into a different orbit while still pretending to be grounded in the same life. And the hardest part? She was good at it. So good, in fact, that I think she almost convinced herself. But I wasn't convinced. Not anymore. The truth didn't come crashing down all at once. It arrived quietly, in the form of an old silver laptop we both thought had stopped being useful years ago. We'd kept it mostly for storing old tax files and scanned receipts. Things we swore we'd organize someday but never did. The only reason I opened it was because I needed to dig up an old insurance document. Something about Emily's policy. I don't even remember the details now. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I clicked into a folder I hadn't opened in years. And then everything changed. At first, it looked like nothing. Just a generic file called homeprojects_2022. Inside was a clutter of PDFs, spreadsheets, and a single password-protected zip folder. That caught my attention. Not because password protection is unusual, but because Emily never protected anything. She always said she hated having to remember passwords, and that she had nothing to hide anyway. I tried a few obvious combinations: our anniversary, her middle name, the dog's birthday. The third one worked. Inside the folder, over 200 images. All synced from her cloud storage. Apparently, the laptop had been quietly backing up files she hadn't realized were linked to it. It wasn't a careless mistake. It was the kind people make when they're so confident in their control of a situation that they forget how history works. I clicked on the first photo. It was her, in a hotel room, sitting on the edge of a neatly made bed, wearing a fitted navy blouse I remembered from that morning. The same morning she told me she had an early meeting with a tax consultant downtown. Behind her, in the mirror's reflection, stood Daniel. There was no ambiguity. His shirt was half unbuttoned. One hand rested casually on her thigh, like it had always belonged there. And Emily? She was smiling. Not a nervous, caught-in-the-act smile. A real smile. The kind she used to wear when we'd travel. The kind I hadn't seen in months. I clicked through the next few photos with a mechanical stillness. Hotel rooms. Different angles. Selfies taken from inside Ubers, her head on his shoulder. Beach towels. Dinner plates set for two. One photo showed them sharing headphones on a train. Another, a quiet candid of her asleep in his lap. Then the journal entries started. I didn't know she kept notes, but apparently she had. Typed into a simple text document synced across devices. Probably meant for herself. Maybe him. Maybe both. Each entry had a timestamp and a location. Each one peeled back a version of her I'd never met. I didn't plan on loving Daniel. That's what makes it real, I think. Everything with Cameron felt like a checklist. With Daniel, it just feels like breathing. I scrolled down. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if we were just brave enough to walk away from everything. The houses, the bank accounts, the guilt. Maybe we're both too respectable for that. And further, we talked about Boston again. Renting a place near the water. Maybe next spring. Maybe sooner if we can figure out how to ease out cleanly. Ease out cleanly. That phrase echoed in my head like a bell struck in a cavern. It wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't even a double life. It was a strategy. Plan. A future being drawn up in quiet corners while I mowed the lawn and paid the mortgage. One note stood out from the rest. It was dated a week before the rooftop dinner, the night I saw them together. He's growing suspicious. I can feel it. I've been pulling away too fast. Dee says I have to be more careful, but I'm tired. I just want this part to be over. This part. Meaning me. I don't remember how long I sat there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. The images blurred together. The notes became noise. My hands were cold. My face numb. Somewhere in the background, a delivery truck rumbled past our house. I barely heard it. Eventually, I printed the evidence. 9 full pages. Photos, entries, timestamps, locations. Their whole history, mapped out in full color. I didn't even do it out of anger. I think I just needed it to be real. Tangible. Something I could hold when my mind tried to pretend I was imagining it. After printing, I carefully placed the pages into a plain envelope. No labels. No dramatic notes. Just the truth packaged neatly. I stood at the kitchen island, watching the sun stretch through the window, wondering how many mornings I'd stood in that exact spot while she was somewhere else. Laughing in a hotel room, writing love notes into a digital diary, planning a life that didn't include me. And I realized I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. The kind you don't come back from. I had been living beside a stranger. Sleeping next to someone who had already emotionally exited the building months before she packed a single bag. Someone who looked me in the eye every morning and said, "Love you," while scheduling hotel stays in another city. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come from loss, but from knowing you've been edited out of someone's story long before you were ready. That's what this was. And I didn't want to be in her story anymore. Not even as a footnote. By the time I heard the key turn in the front door that night, I already knew what I was going to do. I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse lines in my head. I didn't even open the envelope again. Everything had already happened. There was nothing left to argue about. No need for confrontation. This wasn't a fight. It was an exit. Emily stepped through the doorway like nothing had changed. She was still wearing her gray coat, the one she only wore when she was trying to look both professional and approachable. I watched her from the living room as she kicked off her heels and gave me that same tired smile she'd perfected over the last year. "Hey," she said. "Sorry I'm late." The meeting ran over again. I didn't answer. I just nodded, and she walked past me toward the kitchen, humming something under her breath. She opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, scrolled her phone. It was surreal how ordinary she looked, like she wasn't holding two lives in her hands and pretending one of them wasn't on fire. Later that night, she went to bed before me, said she had another early call in the morning and kissed my cheek the same way she always did, soft, brief, practiced. She didn't notice the missing suitcase in the hallway closet. She didn't notice the printer tray was empty. She didn't notice that I wasn't looking at her when she said goodnight. When I heard the door click shut upstairs, I moved. Not with panic or revenge, just quiet efficiency. I packed only what mattered to her. The things she used every day, the things she touched, the things she would notice immediately if gone. Her favorite coat, her skincare set, the makeup bag that never left the counter, her personal laptop, the silk robe she wore on lazy Sundays, her pairs of shoes all handpicked. I left the photos in their envelope and placed it carefully on her pillow. There was no note. No, "I found out." No, "How could you?" No dramatic postscript. Just the proof. And the silence it deserved. Then I logged into our shared accounts. Bank. Streaming services. Email. I revoked her access one by one. Not out of spite, but to draw a line. The digital life we'd built together was now part of the past. I wasn't going to share inboxes with someone planning a future with someone else. The passwords were changed. Two-factor removed. Financial accounts separated. In less than an hour, I had erased every practical thread that bound us together. By dawn, I was gone. I didn't take much. Just my essentials, a few clothes, documents, and my dog-eared copy of East of Eden. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave anything behind for her to break. I just left. Some people believe closure has to be loud, that it has to come with screaming and accusations and shattered plates on hardwood floors. But I'd learned something. Sometimes the cleanest break is the one that says nothing at all. For 3 full days, there was nothing. No texts, no missed calls, no emails. No, "Can we talk?" Or "Please explain." Just silence. She hadn't tried to chase me, hadn't even asked where I went. I wasn't sure if that made it easier or infinitely worse. But on the 4th day, something shifted. It started with a post. She reactivated her Instagram. Her first update wasn't a selfie or a picture of us. It was a filtered *T of a ceramic teacup on a linen blanket, the corner of a book peeking out beside it. Pale light through a frosted window. Captioned, "Sometimes the hardest thing is choosing yourself. Herb #healing #new beginnings #clarity." It hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't anticipated how it would feel. Watching someone rebrand the ending of our life together into a vaguely poetic, personal transformation. She didn't mention me. Not by name. Not by context. Just subtle insinuation wrapped in soft aesthetics. I scrolled through the comments. friends, co-workers, strangers. So proud of you. Sending love, you're so strong. You're glowing. Keep going. It was like watching someone paint over a crime scene with pastels. She'd cast herself not as a wife who'd lied, cheated, and plotted a second life, but as a woman reclaiming her voice, as a soul unburdened, as the protagonist in a wellness journey. I didn't recognize the woman in that photo. I didn't recognize the tone of her words, the curated stillness, the delicate vulnerability. It was carefully constructed like everything else. She'd always been good at storytelling, but this was calculated. She hadn't reached out to me because she didn't need to. She was already speaking to an audience. She didn't need truth. She needed narrative. One where she wasn't the villain. One where pain didn't come from betrayal, but from growth. And the thing about telling your story first? Most people will believe it. I wanted to tell myself that I didn't care, that I didn't need to respond, that the people who mattered would know better. But the truth is, there was a part of me that did care. Not for validation, not for revenge, but because I wasn't even in her story anymore. In her world, I'd become a symbol, a lesson, an obstacle overcome, not a person, not a husband who quietly handed her back her lies in a sealed envelope, not the man who walked away without a word because every word would have been a trap. She had erased me, and she did it with soft lighting and elegant captions. A week later, a photo surfaced. Her and Daniel on that rooftop, unmistakably close. It spread fast until it vanished. Deleted, reported, forgotten. She followed up with another vague post about privacy and toxic narratives. Comments poured in, shielding her from the truth. The applause resumed. And just like that, the facts were buried beneath filters and misdirection. Friends reached out cautiously, asking the kinds of questions that hid accusations inside sympathy. Cameron never replied. No posts, no explanations, no retaliation. He relocated, changed numbers, started fresh. In her version of events, he became a nameless footnote. But he held the truth untainted, unperformed. While she curated rebirth, he reclaimed peace. In the silence, he found himself again.